Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike? Leslie, guess what today is?
It's hump day.
Woo-woo! Faith says, God, I don't think you brought me this far in order to believe me now. I wish I had some folk in here that had some crazy faith. Woo-hoo! Can I tell you what crazy faith does? Crazy faith thanks God in advance before you receive it. Anybody can out when you get it.
This is the day that the Lord hath made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. This is our midweek Sunday school lesson Bible study, or to shorten it, we can just call it Hump Day Bible study. We are studying from the book, Not a Fan. And as we said last week, certainly we endorse it and ask and say that you would love to have it in your own personal library. So you can get that, pick that up and read it. Our lesson for today, ask a question. Do you know him? Matthew chapter 15 verse 8 says, these people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Now let's do a pop quiz. Answer the following questions. How many books are in the Old Testament? How many books are in the Bible? Name me 2 books of the Bible named after women. And where was Jesus born? And now let me ask you an easy one. Can you recite Psalms 23? Yes, no, I think so. Now, what if I told you that Jesus is not impressed with you getting with all of those answers correct? What he wants to know is, do you know me? And that was one of the things that we see over and over in Scripture. Matthew 21, verse 10 through 11, reads this. And when he had come into Jerusalem, all the city was moved, saying, who is this? So the multitude said, this is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth of Galilee. Matthew 22, 41 through 42 says this. Then surrounded by the Pharisees, Jesus asked them a question. What do you think about the Messiah? Whose son is he? They replied, he is the son of David. Wrong answer. Matthew chapter 16, verses 13 through 15. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? Well, they replied, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. Then he asked them, but who do you say I am? And my sisters and brothers, that's a question all of us are going to have to answer one day. Who do you say Jesus is? Now, the disciples who had traveled around with Jesus day and night, Jesus even went in the 14th chapter of John, when he's telling them he is going to go away. You know, John 14, we love that. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Then we stop. But we need to keep reading, because Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going, so how can we know the way? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, he said, if you had known me, and there's the key, if you had known me. So the question for our lesson today is, do you know him? We're not talking about know about him, but you know of him, but do you know him? Now, the word know means that we are sure about something. We are positive. We have knowledge, clear understanding. We have a perception. We have insight into. So, do we have a good, clear knowledge of Jesus? Someone once said that to know someone, you have to live with them. Well, maybe that's how come we don't know Jesus, is because we don't let him live with us. Whoops. So, now, the best biblical word for know or for intimacy is to know. And the Greek word for it is yada. You know, many times we say yada, yada, yada. Well, we talking about you just talking. But that's the word that is for know. Now, and the best way to really understand it is that yada means to know completely and to be completely known. So in Psalms 139, David uses the word yada a half a dozen times to describe how God knows us. Psalms 139. O Lord, you have examined my heart and know everything about me. You know when I sit down or stand up. You know my thoughts even when I'm far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. You know what I am going to say even before I say it. That's how well he knows us. But do we know him? That's the question that we got to keep in front of us. Do we know him? See, when you know a person, I mean not know of them, but when we know a person, then we wouldn't be so quick to perhaps criticize or talk about or make accusations, that we will say, well, I know that person, and they wouldn't say that, or they wouldn't do that. If you knew Jesus and his power and really believe, then we would not be flipping out because of who's in the White House, who's in the State House, who's in the governor's house. We would not be all tripping out if we knew him and know that he's in control. Because if we know him, we know he is sovereign. We know that he's in control. So regardless, Democrat, Republican, Independent, whoever you might be, Tea Party, no party, if we know God and know he's in control, then we will leave it in his hands. So let's look at this. When there is knowledge without intimacy, you are really no more than a fan. You are no more. Instead of identifying myself as a follower because I know about Jesus, I am a follower because I know Jesus. See, in other words, I know him. And so some things are not worth me worrying about because I believe, I know that God's got my back. Why am I going to worry about it? Why would I worry about it? I am a follower because I have a personal, intimate relationship with Jesus. I am not talking about what I heard. At one time, yes, my mother had to tell me about him. I heard others talk about him. But there are some things that I now know for myself. I heard people talk about, well, you know, he's a doctor. Well, I heard them talk about it. But now I know he's a doctor and he's a healer. More than just being a doctor, he's a healer. I know that he's a keeper. And some things you learn because of the situation you find yourself in. Now, I would say this. I've always, because my mother lived with me for many years. And I thought, well, when she passed, I don't think I'm going to be able to stay in this big old house by myself. And I thought, well, I'll move to, because I definitely not going to sleep in no second floor bedroom. But guess what? My mother come next week. We'll have been in glory 7 years. And I have never lost a night's sleep. Why? Because I know he's got my back. I know he's watching over me. I know he's not going to let anything happen to me because I know him. Now, let's go deep. Let's look. Luke chapter 14, verse 25 through 27. Now, great multitudes went with him. And he turned, let's talk about Jesus, and he said to them, you got to listen to this because we really getting ready to blow your mind now. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. Let me read that again. And he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. When I read that, I said, say, what, Jesus? Hate my father, my mother, my husband, my wife, my children, my brother and sister? Come on, Jesus. That's kind of hard. And in fact, I went back to last week's lesson, John chapter 6, verse 60, when the disciples were saying, this is a hard saying. I mean, who can do this? This is one of these hard sayings, except you hate your father, your mother, your wife, your children, brothers and sisters, and yes, even your own life. So I thought, okay, now there's got to be something more going on here. I got to get an understanding of this. So because I said, what do you mean? I have to hate my grandmama, a big mama, nana, whatever you might call her. I got to hate her. Now, so Jesus is honest in telling us what it costs to follow him. So I thought, okay, let me go to another translation. So I went to the English Standard Version. And it says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate, oops, there it is again. Let me try another one. The NIV, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, oops, there it is again. So I went to the Amplified Bible. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother, then the Amplified Bible always put it in parentheses, in the sense of indifference to, our relative disregard for them in comparison with his attitude toward God. I said, okay, now that making me a little more sense. So I went to the New Living Translation. If you want to be my disciple, you must, by comparison, hate everyone else. By comparison. Your father, your mother, your wife, and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even your own life. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. So then, I went to the Contemporary English Version. And here's what it said. You cannot be my disciple unless you love me more than you love your father and mother, your wife and children, and your brothers and sisters. You cannot come with me unless you love me more than you love your own life. Woo! Fanned our follower. But now you get a better understanding. He is not telling us to dislike or to have this intense feeling of hatred or hostility toward our family. He is simply telling us that he must be first. Now, and one of the reasons why Jesus wants them to understand this, because in those biblical days, and for a Jew to turn toward Jesus and his teaching, here's what would happen to them. They would offend their parents or grandparents. That meant they could be cut out of the will, or they would be cut off from the family. Their family would turn their backs on them. In fact, they would have a mock funeral and say, they're dead. They would take your possessions, your house, everything that you have. Why? Because you're dead. Now, that to be able to turn your back on your family, your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your children, lose your home, lose everything you have for the cause of Christ. Fanned our follower. You see, now, and what we need to understand, he does not ask us to sell everything to follow him. There's nowhere in the scripture other than when he was talking to the rich young ruler, he said, sell everything. That was because he needed to bring to the front of this young man's mind that, look, you have a problem that you got riches in front of everything else. That's your priority. And he wanted the young man to see his priority. So today, what does it mean? We need to, our father, our mother, sisters, our brothers, they probably won't cut us off. We don't have anything to lose. We don't have any wealth. So what's the big deal? But the big deal is you need to change your lifestyle. And some of us have a problem cutting our friends, stop going certain places, stop doing certain things. Many of us, and that's a series we're going to do perhaps later in the year, is that following Jesus and not embarrassing God. Because many times we call ourselves following Jesus, but we are an embarrassment to God. We cannot say one thing and then do another. So we see here what Jesus wants from us is that we love him more than we love father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sister, even your own life. He is saying, I must have first place. Now, let me say this again. Jesus, let me even correct myself. He is not saying he wants to have first place in our life. Let me just correct that statement I just made. He said he must have first place. He said, no, I don't even want first place. What he is saying is that he don't want there to even to be a second place. Let me explain what I mean. If you had a list, Jesus is first, and that's the list. There is no second place. Because in other words, what Jesus is saying, in relationship with him, there is and there should be no competition. Woo! Y'all got to get this in your spirit. He has to be first and only. So many times we are willing to make him first in our life. But he is not saying, I want to be first. He is saying, I must be the one and only one in your life. There is to be no one else. No one is a match for Jesus. And that's what we've got to understand. So when he says, you must hate me, because if you put your hand to the plow and look back, he said, then guess what? Not worthy. So he wants us to be committed to him and him only. Let me talk about, I had said earlier about being an embarrassment to God. Let me give you an illustration. In the 14th century, they used to wear hats. But no one could afford the hat but rich people, aristocrats. So the rest of people who were professionals or just regular commoners wore hoods. And they would have a hood, whatever color. Yeah, say if I was a teacher, there would be a certain shape and a certain color for the hood that I would wear. And just by wearing that hood, you would know that's a teacher. If it was a doctor, you would know that's a doctor. Seems simple enough, but the problem was the people in the 14th century, there was no good rogues then. What they would do is get a hood and go to another village, pass themselves off as a wandering teacher, a physician, an attorney. And that practice was so widespread until it became known as wearing a false hood. And that's where we get our word falsehood from, because we would be wearing a false hood. Now, I say this because I want you to check yourself. If you are one way on a Sunday and people don't recognize you as that Sunday school teacher, that choir member, that minister, that deacon, the usher, the greeter, whoever you may be on a Monday, then you need to check yourself. You may be wearing a falsehood and thereby being an embarrassment to God. Ooh, think about that. Think about that. We don't, just remember, one of the things, and I bet your mama did the same thing, when I would get ready to go out, when I was much younger, and get ready to go out on a date, my mother would always say the same thing. Don't forget who you are and whose you are. In other words, don't embarrass me. I don't embarrass my name. And then the other question was, of course, then I'm kind of timing myself, because she would say, do you have a dime? That's all it cost to make a telephone call, was a dime. So you had to have a dime in your pocket, or 10 cents, so you could make a telephone call just in case the company you was keeping got a little too frisky. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, that's what we had to do, because they did not want you to be an embarrassment. And God does not want us to be an embarrassment to him. So, are you a fan or a follower? See, fans will try and make Jesus one of many. Some fans may even make Jesus the first one of many. But when Jesus defines the relationship, he makes it clear he wants to be one and only. Now, is Jesus one of many, or is he your one and only? So, let's answer a few questions to see if Jesus is your one of many or your one and only. And think about these questions. Number one, for what do you sacrifice your money? Because the scripture teaches us where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. Where your heart is where your treasure is going to be. So what do you sacrifice for your money? Many don't even use checkbooks nowadays, but you could tell where a person's heart was if you looked at their checkbook. And many times if you look at the checkbook, they will be paying the rent, paying the bills, going shopping, paying dealers, Macy's, Stewart's, when Stewart's was in, that type of thing. But what do you spend or sacrifice your money for? And many times when we just got through completing the series on money, you never heard so many people talking about, well, you see, sometimes what do you do when you don't have? Well, why don't you have? See, we make and get what we want. We will sacrifice. If we wanted to go someplace, we'll sacrifice. Want to take a vacation, we'll start saving. What do you sacrifice your money for? When you hurt, where do you go for comfort? Now, before everybody start out, I go to Jesus. No, you don't. Many of us, old folks used to put it in a song this way: we confide in friends and loved ones, but we find out they have problems too. Now, this little boy just loved his teacher. In fact, he loved his teacher so much that Mama thought, well, okay, my teacher's replacing me. But the mother went to school one day for Parent Day, and she was standing out on the playground talking to the teacher, and the little boy was out there just having a good time on the monkey bar. And bless God, he fell, hurt himself. He started crying. Where did he go? He did not run to the teacher, but he ran to his mother. Why? Because he knew that Mama would care and take care of him. He loved the teacher, But when the rubber met the road, he met the sidewalk, he ran to his mama. Where do you run when you have troubles? Many times we will confide and call people before we even go to God. In fact, my niece tells the story that she was about 15, maybe 16, and she was on her way to school one morning. And this man came up behind her and grabbed her and tried to drag her into the alley. And she was screaming. It was early and it was dark and nobody was around. And she was screaming. Who did she scream for? Well, just like most of us. Her first thing was, Mama, help me. Then it was, Daddy, help me. And she was tussling and fighting with this man. And then finally she came to her and she said, I thought to myself, Lord, she started praying, Lord, you said that you would take care of me and now you won't help me. When she heard a voice say to her, you call for your mama, you call for daddy, but you haven't asked me. And so immediately she said, Lord, help me. And it was as if she became too hot for him to hold on to because he immediately released her and she was able to run away. And see, the first thing, and she always said, I always remember that he said, you haven't called on me. And many times we fail to call on him first. He's the only one that can do us any good many times, and we make him last. But when she called on him, he answered. As I'm sure that many of us know and can attest to, how many times have we called on friends and loved ones? We talk to people and then they go tell our business. But there's a God who rules earth and heaven, and he will come to your aid. In fact, I love Exodus 3 and 8, I believe it is. And it says, for I have heard the cries of my people. I have seen what they've gone through. I know what the problem is. And now I am come down. Now, I don't know about y'all, but that just always gives me joy. Because he says, I can see, I know, I hear the cries of my people. I'm not sending somebody else. I am come down to see about them. So the question is, when you hurt, who do you go to for comfort? He needs to be the first one, because in fact, before he left, he said, if I don't leave, then the comforter can't come. In fact, when he left us, he said, I'm going to leave you a comforter. And that's who you need to run to. And question number 3, what is it that really gets you excited? Now, many of you got excited over the football game last week. Or if you was like me, I got excited when U of L girls beat Yukon Huskies. Some of you got excited when maybe your team won a lot. But what do you get excited about? When was the last time that you got excited just thinking about, I'm getting ready to go to church? David said, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. Coming to church, does it get you excited? Only you can answer that question. Following Jesus means following him alone. No one else. Let me put it another way. Jesus won't share you with another lover. Oops. Now, if you think that analogy is a bit kind of crude or overstated, I challenge you to read Ezekiel chapter 16. Ezekiel chapter 16. And you will see plainly how God feels about our unfaithfulness. And in fact, if you really want to get the full flavor of reading it, read it in the Message translation. And it will open your eyes, because God talks about, when I saw you, when I met you, you were nothing, and what he did for us, and then how we have treated him with our unfaithfulness. That's Ezekiel chapter 16. Read it. It'll do you some good. Now let's go just a little bit deeper before we have to leave you. One of the Pharisees, Luke chapter 7, verse 36 through 39. One of the Pharisees asked Jesus to have dinner with him. So Jesus went to his house, his home, and sat down to eat. When a certain immoral woman from that city heard he was eating there, she brought a beautiful alabaster jar with expensive perfume. Then she knelt behind him at his feet, weeping. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped them off with her hair. Then she kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. She's a sinner. Jesus tells Simon the Pharisee tells him this story. And after telling him this story, he turned to the woman and said to Simon, look at this woman kneeling here. When I entered your house, you didn't offer me water to wash the dust from my feet, but she has washed them with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, but from the time I first came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. You neglected the courtesy of olive oil to anoint my head, but she has anointed my feet with rare perfume. Now, and let me tell you something. We need to back it up just a little bit. Whenever you had guests and it was a dignitary, people could come, not to the dinner table, but to the outside court, and listen to the great teacher talk. This woman, no doubt, must have heard Jesus somewhere, someplace, sometime. Because when she heard that Jesus was at Simon's house, she made her way to Simon's house. She wasn't invited. She felt she didn't have to be invited. She wanted to see Jesus. There was a need for her to get to know Jesus. Now, at that time, you had it on the floor. The dinner table would kind of be floor level, and the guests would lean toward the table with the feet back out. So she comes up behind Jesus, and she is so distraught, in the sense, so grieved with her burden of sin, a burden, that she's crying, and the tears fall on Jesus' feet. Now, Simon had not washed or given him water to wash his feet or a servant to wash his feet. He just had him in. But this woman, she knelt behind him. Her tears washed his feet. And then she did something amazing. She kissed his feet. Now, they wore sandals then. And so I imagine Jesus' feet were kind of dirty because they hadn't been washed. And yet she kissed his feet, then took her hair and wiped his feet. Now that means, we think, ooh, her hair. But here's what you need to understand and know. A good woman, let's put quotes, good woman, did not let her hair down in public. So for this woman to have her hair down and then wipe his feet, this was unbelievable. This was something unheard of. This was something not done. Now notice this. She came with a gift, because I read to you that she came with an alabaster jar of expensive perfume. She did not give Jesus just a little something or nothing, but she was an immoral woman. She wasn't out, she didn't have no cheap perfume. She had the good stuff, and yet she was willing to pour this on Jesus' feet and then wipe his feet with her hair. Now, so at the end, we have to take a look at this. The religious leader, with all of the knowledge, because the Pharisees had knowledge of the law of Moses, but the religious leader with all the knowledge is the fan. And the prostitute, who intimately expressed her love for Jesus, is shown to be the follower. And see, many times we would have flipped it the other way, that she a fan, he a follower. But she is the follower and he is the fan. And like the Pharisees, many fans have given their minds to the study of God, but they have never surrendered their heart. They have plenty knowledge of God, but they don't really know God. So, here's the questions that you and I have to ask ourselves. Which one of these persons, the Pharisee or the prostitute, am I in this story? When was the last time I had a moment with Jesus like this woman did? When was the last time I poured myself out before him? When was the last time tears streamed down my face as I expressed my love for him? When was the last time I demonstrated my love for him with reckless abandonment? When was the time that I did this? The question is not if I know about him, but do I know him? And that's the question that you need to ask yourself. Do I know him? The old song says, yes, I know Jesus. Yes, I know Jesus. Yes, I know him for myself. Woke me up this morning. I saw a brand new dawning. Feeds me when I'm hungry. Comforts me when I'm lonely. Yes, I know Jesus. Yes, I know Jesus. And yes, I know him for myself. We have to get past what we were told about him to I know him for myself. Now, that's our lesson for this week. You absolutely need to tune in next week. This week we talked about, do you know Jesus? Next week, we're going to talk about, does he know you? And really and truly, you do not want to miss the lesson for next week. It is sobering, thought-provoking, and will leave you wondering and taking and searching for yourself. But for right now, you need to know, do you know him? And next week we will talk about, does he know you? Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next Wednesday, same time. If you got any questions or anything that you need to say, just go to the chat room and tell us about it. See you then.